Well, welcome to a special edition of the Dark Side of Soul podcast. This is Joe,
This is Sean.
and we wanted to do a quick little episode discussing the tragedy that happened this past weekend in Itaewon. We just published before this our episode on Korean Halloween, and we did talk a bit about Itaewon during that, including strong suggestions to not go to Itaewon because of the crowds. But unfortunately, this is as predictable. Some of this could have been. No one could have predicted it would have been this bad. This bad.
Yeah, an actual tragedy.
An actual tragedy where this many people were injured and killed. Now I'm going to relay the latest that we know. Right now, the death toll stands at 154. 26 of them are foreigners. Most of the victims were in their teens and 20s, and 2/3 of them were women. And that was an interesting statistic. Now, when I was there, I wasn't in Itaewon on Saturday. I was doing a tour, and then I went to Hongdae with one of my tour guests to see Rocky Horror. I was planning on going home, but it was such a good crowd. I mean, such a good group on a Saturday that I was like, oh, well, I'm energized. I'll do Rocky Horror again. And we went because the guest was planning to go to Itaewon, and I convinced her to go with me to Hongdae. And then I remember when that was done, I got a taxi, and traffic was higher than it usually was for 3 a.m. on Hongdae. And my taxi driver was even commenting on that, and I was wondering if that was some side effect of what was happening in Itaewon. And then I got home around 4 or 5, 4 or so, got ready for bed, and right when I was lying down, I just checked my phone. I was just checking my phone, and I just got a barrage of messages asking if I was okay. I was like, what? And then I looked at the news and saw what was going on. In fact, there wasn't really much on the news yet. I mean, it was New York Times, Chae Sang-hoon, who I've talked about before, is like one of the greatest reporters in the world. He was on top of it, covering he had a team going, giving constant updates on what was going on. And I was contacted by one of my journalist friends to do an interview at 5 a.m. while I was in bed. So I did that. And then I woke up my family to tell them the news, because I didn't want them to be surprised when they left the house, because I knew I was going to be, since I was going to bed at 5 or 6, I knew I was going to be asleep when they were going off to church or to dance practice, and I didn't want them to be surprised by other people telling them that. So I woke them up and told them, and then went to bed, and that's what happened. And then Sean, I contacted you the next day and discussed whether or not we should cancel our plans, and we decided to go ahead and do it because this is you could say this was a form of mourning. Some people you need to share with others, do things with others, and some people that booked my tour that were singles, and it helped them to be with others. And some people did cancel because of they felt uncomfortable going on the tour, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But we did do the tour. It's very somber. We had a camera crew from the Philippines following us for the first bit, including one. I think the host, the journalist, was a pretty famous celebrity because Filipinos passing him on the street were like, "Oh my God, it's you!"
Really?
Yeah, yeah. But they followed us for a short bit, and then they like, okay, we got enough, and they left. But we started the tour with a moment of silence, and it was a much somber mood, of course, compared to Saturday. Saturday, everyone was laughing and joking, and very few people were giving polite smiles during some parts. That was the best they did. Nonetheless, at the end, people were telling me saying thank you for doing this because they needed something like this yesterday. It was therapeutic.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly why, and I posted about this as well.
Because Sean had a Halloween event over at the Dice Latte.
Right, and also with Straight Chilling Podcast. And we had planned this for a while. And yeah, we decided not to cancel it. Because and we were ended up being thanked for it. Some people need that in the face of tragedy. And I did post about it because in particular our patron Angel, who joined the event yesterday with the Dice Latte, she posted on her social media thanking us and the Dice Latte and Straight Chilling Podcast for not canceling, pointing out how sometimes people need that particular escape.
Yeah,
and I knew some people were going to, so I said, okay, we have to this perspective has to be pointed out, has to be shared. Most people agreed with us, and I knew some people would be critical. The more intellectually bankrupt wouldn't agree. And we did get some comments saying, not the greatest PR move. And it's like, PR move? It's not a PR move. Don't be ridiculous. So yeah, you need to provide a community sometimes during times of grief.
yeah.
And I have dealt with enough personal family grief to know.
Yes, you have.
So anyone criticizing anyone for needing time with others and not space alone, and some people need that, and they should take it. But anyone criticizing people or organizations or companies for providing space and the community that people need are just not seeing the whole picture. They're being very short-sighted.
Yeah.
And that's about as friendly as I can get with people like that.
And so point out a little more. I was on the BBC this morning discussing this and some of the points I'll talk about here. One of the reasons I created Dark Side of Soul was that 10 years ago, there really was not much to do on Halloween. But there was some small Halloween. There were some small Halloween specials, bar specials and such in Itaewon, starting around 2010, 2011. Back then, it really was still a mostly U.S. Army ESL teacher type of area. It hadn't gone through the what I call the machip renaissance. It didn't have the crowds of Instagrammers coming in. Vatos started that when it opened. I think it was 2011. And the area behind the Hamilton Hotel was not that heavily traveled. There were a few bars there. There's a 3 Alley pub. There was Tony's, which is the Australian pub. There was the Saint X, which is a French bistro. There were just a few places back there, but there wasn't really a big crowd. Yeah. Then they did some road work and they tore down some buildings to lengthen the road and make it a bigger boulevard, and more buildings were built in those places on the sides, and they started creating what I was saying, like fake versions of foreign places. Like was it not the Rose and Crown? No, not Rose and Crown, but there's that fake British pub. Now people are saying that's a good British pub, but when it first opened, it was a fake British pub. More of Hong Sok Chun's types of places where it was just fake versions of foreign food. It was a lot of. It was like Epcot. It was foreign experience that was made safe for Koreans. I'd explain that. And it started attracting more of the young locals. The young Koreans started going back there. And that was fine, even though I heard some grumblings in the older expat community saying, this is going to ruin the area. They're going to push all of the foreigners out. And that was a little prophetic because I can only think of one business in that area now that is foreign owned still. I think all the rest are Korean owned. And that just became the area. And so Halloween started growing in that area. I every now and then went over there just as curiosity. 2015, I was thinking of meeting some people there, and I was driving, and I knew then there was no parking there. So I just gave up. And that's when I knew it was starting to get really ridiculous. And now 2019, I have a short video of when I was there. I was in the area because of a friend's going away party. And we decided to dip into Fat Albert's, which used to be Three Alley Pub. And which is over in that area. We had a couple of drinks, but it was getting too crowded. Then I stepped out to go look at the crowd before I left, and I took video of it. It was also the same day they were doing a scene for the first episode of Itaewon Class is in the area. But yeah, it was ridiculously crowded then, and it was just uncomfortable. It was not a place to be. I don't see how anyone could have had fun in that area. I don't understand why people want to be in a bar that is so crowded. You can't order a drink. You can't talk to anyone. You can't see your friends. I don't see what's so much fun about that. But some people really see a crowd and they want to be a part of the crowd. I wonder if it's FOMO or something. Jump in, Sean, if you have anything. I'm just ranting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've said my personal opinions on Itaewon. I've never liked going to Itaewon. I've maybe been to Itaewon maybe 10 times in 23 years. Just never really liked it as a place. So, yeah, I have nothing. I don't really have anything to add to any of that.
Okay. Well, I did see that the Halloween celebrations were getting larger, and they were getting less controllable. There was very minimal. Now, people said they've seen police controlling the crowds. I never saw it when I was there in 2019. Now, then the pandemic happened, 2020, 2021, and they were really trying to restrict the crowds from going in there. But I'm trying to people broke that. People really were still partying in Itaewon on Halloween for those 2 years. And I'm trying to think of other events that had as large crowds during the pandemic. Can you think of anything?
The protests. That's it.
But yeah, protests, and yeah. There were the protests against the COVID restrictions. So those are the only ones where there were big crowds was those protests and Itaewon Halloween. I'm pointing this out because the authorities have been giving the excuse that they didn't anticipate it was going to be larger than usual this year. And that was either untruthful or their heads were way more up their asses than I thought.
Yeah.
Because this year we've been seeing revenge celebrations. We've been seeing people going out in full force, crowding all the bars and restaurants. There are lines outside of places now that were never lines in many places. Iksundong, Jungno Samga, Gangnam, Hongdae, I've noticed are more crowded than they were before the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm thinking like the authorities were really just not paying attention. They didn't have their ears on the ground. They must have been stuck in their country clubs or something, not paying attention.
Yeah.
Because
Definitely.
I don't see how this was not predictable, other than think saying, "Oh, it's Itaewon. We don't care about Itaewon."
Yeah, and I don't. I've been reading stuff too. Is like, oh, they're calling it like the Halloween tragedy and stuff like that, and they're kind of pinning it. It's on. It's as if they're saying it happened because it was Halloween,
Mm-hmm.
but honestly, I think I've seen far more people gathered together in. No, I've never. I wasn't there that night. I was also doing a tour that night. I was doing a nighttime hiking tour, but so I wasn't there. But 2002, the World Cup through Kwanghomun, that was absolute madness. It was
Yeah,
million. It was millions of people in the streets.
yeah, and Myeongdong on Christmas Eve. I've been
Yeah,
in those types of crowds.
right. I just think this. I think this was mostly a tragic accident.
It
I think
was
everything just kind of everything was just in the pot at the wrong time and just
true.
created this tragic result. And yeah, so people are out celebrating like they did every year. Yeah, there were a lot of people there, but I don't know, like the blame game is starting to be played, and let people play it. I'm fine. I'm not.
Yeah,
For me, I think we should always wait longer before we try to find out really why things happened or start pointing fingers.
yeah,
Because there's so much that's just unaccounted for. But people are dead, and
yeah,
and young people are dead.
yeah,
There was a middle schooler who died.
yeah,
So um, I think we have to be. I think we have to have our let people who need space, let them have space. People who need community, provide community for them if we are willing, and allow this whole thing to kind of breathe a little bit before we start really openly and publicly blaming things and whatnot. I don't know. I do think it was just an accident, but um, let it sink in a little bit more for a
yeah.
lot of people.
I'm afraid that that's pointing out that it's Halloween. They're trying to make it, oh, it's a foreign thing, and the mentality is we can blame someone else instead. We don't have to take our own responsibility for this. It's a foreign thing. Now,
I do think that's how the media is already starting to try to spin it.
yeah, well, I am going to start blaming the authorities though.
Okay.
Already, I
Okay.
am.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it was some parts were preventable.
Yeah, but I mean, like that's yes, but at the same time, I think in a lot of ways everything is preventable, and you can choose certain reasons for why something could have been preventable. If no one went, it would have been preventable. If 50,000 fewer people went,
True.
it would have been preventable. But what was the exact catalyst that
Well,
caused it? I don't
okay.
think there was an exact. That's my point. I don't think.
Well, okay. There were a few, and that's why I think it was preventable because, for one thing, the authorities actually said they shifted the police force to a protest,
Oh yes, yes,
which
yes.
shows where the priorities are. The priorities are more on anti-government protesters rather than protecting. It's more about protecting the elites from the protesters than protecting the youth.
Oh no, well, yes. You know how
I knew that would. I
my
knew you. I
my
knew.
my my feelings on cops are not are no secret on the show.
I knew you did that. I knew you'd like that one. But I mean, what I'm hearing from eyewitness accounts, people who are actually in there, and I've seen some scary, scary videos of people who inside the actual alley around when it was happening. that it sounded like, okay, for one thing, that one narrow alley, there were two places where it was happening. There's this one wider one that's the big entrance to the area behind the Hamilton, but there's one on the western side of the Hamilton Hotel that is much narrower. The people say only 6 adults can walk down side by side. And the thing is, that alley, people were trying to go up and people trying to go down, and it is a little bit of a slope. It's not a big slope, but it is a bit of a slope. And
It
so
slopes down to the main road, right?
right. And so eyewitnesses were saying they remember some men in the back were yelling, push, push, push.
Yeah,
And then the crowd started, and they were chanting it, push, push. And so then the crowd suddenly surged forward, and that's when people fell down like dominoes on top of each other. Now, there were mixed accounts. Either some men were just got impatient and wanted the crowd to move because it was stalled, or stuff was already happening and people were trying to yell pull and stop, and people misunderstood and thought they were saying push.
Interesting, right?
So those are two things. Now, yeah, I think one way that could have been prevented, a very low tech solution, was to designate areas for traffic, like have arrows and signs saying this alley is one way only. You can only, they do this anyway. I mean, they do this during the Lantern Festival, directing where people can walk. It's not hard to do. But that, that would have been a simple proactive solution. I think in the future, we could have been done what they did during COVID and have gates that restricted who came in, keep track of who goes in, and for crowd control. There's also, I checked, there is very, very affordable CCTV and AI technology to keep track of crowd numbers.
Yeah.
It costs at most $2,000 a camera for a whole system. I think the city could afford that. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what gets me too, is that they've been characterizing this as a festival in the Korean media, as if that implies that it was organized. It was not organized by a single entity.
That bothered me as well. Like, they're saying if there was a central organizing body, it wouldn't have happened. It's like, well, it's people going out. It isn't it wasn't a festival.
Yeah.
That annoyed me a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
So anyway, this is a very awful tragedy, of course. And I mean, just the numbers of people that really had to have been so bad. Like I said, only 6 adults can walk down that alley side by side. So having that many people die and over twice as many injured.
Yeah, it's just over like 3 meters wide.
How many people were in that alley?
Yeah, it was thousands upon thousands.
How? Yeah. I mean, yeah. So
seen the aerial photos of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
And I've seen, the one TikTok video I saw was the guy who was taking a photo. You could see he was having trouble breathing. He was like doing like Lamaze breathing. He was, you could tell it was, and you heard people screaming. It was nightmarish. And you seen the videos of them trying to pull people out, people out. They were just stuck.
Sides. Yeah.
Stuck. Like, yeah.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So, Sean, I'm sure you've been in situations similar to this. I've been in oppressive crowds.
Yes. Yeah.
Mostly on the subway.
Yeah. Yeah. I tend to, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to wrap up soon.
Yeah. That's why I'm wrapping it up.
In an impromptu kind of episode, but I have been in crowds, and I don't feel comfortable in crowds. I never have.
Yeah,
the very first time I went to Dongdaemun was I don't know, 20 a long time ago, and I was with my girlfriend at the time. We turned the corner, and I looked up the escalator, and I saw just hundreds of people entering the building. I told her, I said, I'm not going in there.
Yeah.
And she's like, why not? I was like, no way. I'm not going up. I'm not going in with all those people. Sorry. And I don't really like going to rock concerts. I love rock music and, music and whatnot, but I don't like going to concerts too much because it's just too crowded. I have been to shows like in Korea. I saw the Smashing Pumpkins in 2010 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Great show. The band was on fire.
Yeah, I saw you too. 2019. Yeah.
Right. But enjoyed myself, and it was kind of packed and crowded. Yeah, it's like you're definitely at the whims of motion. You can't you can't do anything. You're helpless.
Right. So I'm going to give, if you're ever in the situation, there are already articles about this, and this is from my experience, and how the experts say what you should do. First, do what Sean says. Anticipate before you enter a crowd. I mean, either avoid the crowd in general, because I think a lot of the people that were stuck in this crowd, they were trying to go from point A to point B, and they didn't know there was a crowd in between, and they thought they could just get through. I don't think they saw a crowd and went, "Oh, I want to be a part of this." I think they were just trying to, like, "Oh, we have to meet our friends at this place," and they were going there. So first, try to anticipate if there's a crowd. It might be a dangerous crowd. What I've learned is to walk or stand with legs apart for more balance. If you keep your legs together, you're more likely you'll be more top heavy. If you apart, you have a lot wider space to be able to anticipate shifts in pressure. I do this on the subway. If it's really crowded, it doesn't matter. I keep my legs apart. When I do that, I'm less likely to fall over people, and I have nothing to hold on to. That helps a lot. But it also helps to go along with the flow of the crowd. Like you said, Sean, when you're stuck in something that big, don't fight it. You're just like a bubble almost floating through the crowd. I've done this before. But the only control you should do is like go with the flow, but try to go in a diagonal, because a lot of people are going straight. If you go in a diagonal, it's easier to get out of the crowd. Don't try to go horizontal out of the crowd. Go in a diagonal out of the crowd. But the most important thing, this is one thing I've done, and experts have been saying to do, is go with a boxer's stance. Put your ball your fist up and put them in front of your chest. That way your fists give more room for your lungs. And breathe through your diaphragm too. Don't breathe through your chest. But when you're in these oppressive crowds, you have your hands up. And that really helps a lot. That I've been in those situations, and it has helped. Those are our recommendations if you're in this again. So yeah, we'll wrap it up. We want to say, please be careful out there. Yeah, keep track. Just be smart. Be aware. Anyway, we don't like it when the dark side of Seoul is this dark. It makes it's really it's so present. It's so when it's this real and this traumatic. This is another thing. I was talking to the Filipino crew last night. The TV crew, they were there just filming something else when it happened. So they were in the middle of this, and they saw the dead bodies. And the host was interviewing people walking by, and the people were laughing at the dead bodies. And he's like, "Why are you laughing?" And they're like, "Oh, wow, that is so great." They thought this was a prank. People thought that this was not real, that the dead bodies were not real.
Right.
They thought it was an act. So they were walking by and partying and laughing, and the clubs kept going until 4:30. People, there's a lot of the complaints were like the club's music. There was more confusion because the clubs did not turn down their music. There were other cases. There have been acts of heroism too, because employees of some of the places were pulling people out of the crowd into their buildings, and bouncers were keeping people inside the clubs so that more people wouldn't feed the crowd. They were like yelling, "People stop! People are dying!" Even though some men still pushed through to join the crowd. And then there was some bad things, like the club still partied until 4:30 in the morning, and then people were just acting like nothing was going wrong. But a lot of people were not aware something bad was happening too. Anyway, everyone. Okay, until next time, please stay safe.